The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Hey everybody, it's time for Need to Know. Kip Kiefer with you as per usual, first of a brand new week as we plow into February already. January comes and goes in the blink of an eye, and February is off and running as of this weekend. Hope you have a good start to your 2025. Hard to believe I've made the adjustment. I haven't written 2024 on any kind of correspondence or checks, so that's good news. Have made the transition. Want to thank everybody for supporting the program. We try to be topical and give you some things that, I don't just try to regurgitate the news. You don't need this show for news reporting, but I think sometimes to hear some things from an analysis standpoint and maybe a different perspective than you've considered it makes it a worthwhile undertaking. And I do assure you, as I have from day one, the first broadcast here on TKR of the program, that I spend a very large amount of my time really just kind of taking in the information of things that are happening around us and trying to consider every angle. And it kind of is bred by when you do a show like this or a lot of the sports oriented shows that I've been involved in, or any kind of broadcast at all, you get to where you read information, you hear information, you process information, but you're always kind of trying to shape that, mold it, if you will, into a topic. Because when you do this kind of radio, the lifeblood, the backbone, the heartbeat of any kind of show like this is to present ideas, preferably from perspectives that aren't necessarily available in a lot of other corridors. So that's what we try to do here. I got a couple things I want to talk about today that have really kind of lit that fuse. One of those is the dizzying start, which we talked about. Don't forget, Donald Trump has just been president since January 20th. That's when he took the oath of office. I'm coming to you today with this broadcast on February the 3rd. So it's not going to take you very long to do the math that was exactly 14 days ago today. Now, let me ask you a question right off the bat. Does it seem like a lot longer than 14 days because of the news cycle and the never-ending just flood of information coming out of Washington, all of the congressional hearings on cabinet members, which is one of the main topics of today's program, but also just the unbelievable volume. We've never had a presidency get off to this kind of start where, it's from day one, the entire lineup of different things, different items that this president campaigned on, that he literally hit the ground running with executive orders on the very first day of all the campaign promises, putting everything in motion, all of the platforms, all of the agenda that the American people overwhelmingly voted for. And you've got a situation that's very unique in American history. In case you missed the show a few weeks ago, I told you of my personal experience in 2016, in December of that year, when my former boss, Phil Ruffin, who owns a lot of the properties in Las Vegas, the Treasure Island Casino, several others all around the world, including in the Bahamas. He has commercial property from coast to coast, really one of the wealthiest guys in the world, most successful. He's 88 years young. He's still at the office at about 4:30 in the morning every day. The guy is unbelievable. He is also a longtime business associate and very close personal friend of the president, Donald J. Trump. In fact, during the inauguration ceremony, you could see Phil kind of over in the back of the picture, witnessing that whole event, and showed up, of course, at a couple other things on that night. And again, he's 88 years old, so kind of a remarkable guy. But Phil called me on December 4th. I've still got the message on my phone from the day before. He called me back on December the 4th. That was, of course, the election had been 1 month before that when Donald Trump shocked Hillary Clinton and won the presidency. But on that phone call, just to kind of set the scene here, after talking to me about some business questions that he had on some gaming developments, since that's the area that I was involved with him before as his manager of all of his properties in Kansas. I just kind of said to Phil, well, I guess your boy's on his way to Washington. And he said, yeah, he called me yesterday. He wants me to come to New York and waste a couple of weeks sitting up in Trump Tower, interviewing, vetting cabinet nominees and people for all these appointments. He's got to make like 200 appointments, and asked me if I could sit in and just kind of give my impressions of these people as they came in to talk to him. And I said, Donald, I'm sorry, but I've got a business to run here. I can't come to New York for 2 weeks and do that. You're going to have to get somebody else. I wouldn't really be much help. So basically, he turned down the president of the United States because Phil is so consumed in his own business. But I say that because that was December 4th. The election had been over for 30 days, and Trump had not interviewed candidates for cabinet posts because, again, the first time in 2016, he did not know what he was getting into. He really hadn't thought about it. Wasn't prepared. I'm sure he hoped to win the election. I don't think he was operating on the premise that he was going to win the election because by all accounts, he was a big underdog. Well, he did win it. And it was a month later, and they hadn't really gotten organized. This time, after learning the hard way in his first experience in Washington, where he went there still behind the 8 ball in terms of understanding that the first stages of a presidency are by far the most important when you've got the momentum of just being elected. And you also have the mandate from the American people. That's the time to hit the ground running and get things done. The first time Trump went to Washington, he made a couple of catastrophic mistakes. He listened to a bunch of Washington insiders who, believe me, did not have his best interests and the people who voted for him's best interest in mind. Because, as I've told you over and over and over on this show, this is not Republican Democrat. This is not blue versus red. This is not conservative versus liberal. This is Washington, D.C., the elite power brokers who think they are entitled to be in charge of everything, who believe that government is the answer to everything. It's the Washington establishment, the deep state, the swamp, if you will, whatever you want to call it. If you don't think that exists, you are naive and misinformed, because these people believe it's their birthright, believe that their Ivy League education, believe that the silver spoon up their rear end that they've had since they've been born entitles them to make decisions on your behalf in a country that's founded to do anything but that. In a country that was conceived and created to be the shining city on the hill, where the citizens, the people that populate the country, that do the work, that pay the taxes, Those are the people that run this government. And this group does not believe that. They don't think you're qualified to make decisions about your life because you're not holding a degree from Princeton or Harvard or Columbia or whatever. And that is really kind of what we deal with here. And any outsider to Washington gets met with tremendous resistance. And believe me, right now, just 14 days in, they cannot believe this guy is back. They did everything to try and knock him out of the box, from trying to bankrupt him to trying to imprison him, to try to make it as just uncomfortable as it could possibly be. But this guy is the ultimate fighter, and anybody who doubts Donald Trump's motivation needs to listen carefully. I've said it a couple times on the show, but I can't say it enough times. Phil Ruffin gave me a accounting of a conversation he had with Donald Trump way back when he was running for president, when he had come down from the escalator in 2015 and had announced his candidacy and ran into first kind of an environment where people were laughing at the audacity of this businessman thinking he could be president. He had no political experience, which, as it turns out, is the greatest asset that he has. Because think about it, and I've asked you this question before. What does a politician have in way of experience? They go to Washington and they learn how to interact, and they learn how to personally profit, and they learn how to say and do the right things to continue to get elected to the greatest gig there possibly is in the world. People are stuffing your pockets with money. People are, bowing to your every need. You are provided with gigantic staffs that do everything for you. You don't pay for anything. You have just the life of Riley and then some, if you are a member of not only elected office, but all of these bureaucrats with their lifetime appointments who really do determine, but through their regulations and their different department policies, they really do decide an awful lot about how American life is going to be lived by you and I, the citizens. And we didn't vote for him. It's like the old Monty Python line. He comes across the commoner and he says, the guy goes, "Who are you?" And he goes, "Well, I'm your king." And he goes, "Well, I didn't vote for you." Well, that's how I feel about all these bureaucrats and the Department of Education and the Department of the Interior and the Environmental Protection Agency and blah, 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 all the alphabet soup agencies that make up this government. 2 million. Let me say that again. 2 million federal employees. This is a gargantuan, bloated mess, and it's got to be cleaned up. And that was the Donald Trump message. And that's what people enthusiastically voted for. So he's got to hit the ground running. So he got off to that slow start. But when Phil asked him in 2015, "Donald, why are you doing this? Why do you want to be president? Don't you understand? You're already king of the world. You're making billions of dollars. You do and go wherever you want. You do whatever you want. This is going to completely change your life." And Phil told me, he looked at him. This is his best friend, or one of his best friends. And he said, "Phil, I love my country, but it's hopelessly broken. And I'm the only one who can fix it." Now think about that. That's what his response was. You don't BS your best friend. You give them an honest answer. And that's what he believes. Okay, call him arrogant, call him conceited, call him whatever you want. This guy believes that if he didn't step in, this country was done. And I got to tell you, I agree completely, because you had to get somebody out of Washington that's not a politician, that's not concerned about their own stake in the game, that is doing this for the American people and for his country. And that honest answer to Phil Ruffin, that I am doing this because it's broken and I'm the only one who can fix it. And just let that marinate a little bit, because that is from not a political speech, not from some kind of interview with some eager reporter. That is a conversation between friends of telling fulfill why he had to run for president and felt like he had to run. And he's continued to run after the ridiculous situation of how the first term ended, all of the allegations, all of the prosecutions, all of the persecutions, assassination attempts, the FBI raiding his home and going through every drawer of the former president. Outrageous, unbelievable, third world banana republic bullshit of putting a former president through all of these unbelievable situations, and yet he stood tall and kept running because he knows it's broken and he thinks he's the only one who can fix it. And God bless us and God bless America that Donald Trump has stepped up to do that, because his goal here is to get this government under control, to stop wasting billions of dollars of your and my money that goes to Washington every single paycheck and is just misappropriated, channeled into all kinds of directions of absurdity, and it's time for this to stop. So when the president comes on board, and he got a better start this time, to say the least, almost from the first day when the election was official, they had already vetted candidates. Unlike the last time, he was ready to go. He had his starting lineup already penciled in, much like I did with my starting lineup television show group. I got exactly the people that I wanted, and that's what Trump did. When you start any endeavor, that's the first step. You've got to get that in line, to get the people this time that are going to help him get his agenda going, because he trusted some Washington insiders last time and they completely screwed him over. The entire city was not on his side. He assumed, just like business, when you go and take the CEO job, that he would have people rally around him and work toward his agenda. It was just the opposite the first time. His first term, he had tremendous success despite this ridiculous resistance in every corner. Almost every staffer has turned around and written some kind of tell-all book of what a horrible person he is and all these things, because these people were never on board and not committed. This time he was going to have his team and have them ready to go and ready to be considered and certified when he got there. And every president in the history of this country has been afforded the opportunity to name the people on his team, to set the stage for the staff that he wants to support his agenda, the agenda overwhelmingly approved and mandated by the American people. And what's happening in Washington right now? Chuck Schumer in the Senate is resisting every move, is pulling every maneuver to try and delay the appointment of all these people that Donald Trump needs on his team. They are dragging the processes out. They are delaying things. They are doing filibusters to prevent hearings. They are campaigning in these. There's nothing more worthless than a congressional hearing. It's an absolute waste of everybody's time, because they're not there to do anything substantive. They're there to have their 5 minutes on camera. Okay, we're going to hear from the kind gentleman from, let's just pick a place, New Jersey. And they'll rail and they'll blabber and they'll criticize and they'll do a 5-minute campaign and personal glorification soliloquy. They don't ask if they do ask a question of the respondent, they cut him off before he can even answer. You even heard Adam Schiff, who might be one of the most disgusting individuals to ever serve in public office, from California, former House guy who did his own hearings, and now he's been elected senator. California, pull your head out of your ass. My goodness, this guy is the biggest horse's ass ever. And in his just rambling 5 minutes with Robert F. Kennedy the other day, who is up for House and Human Services Secretary Schiff, when Kennedy tried to insert some kind of information, Schiff goes, "Okay, I'm not asking you a question. This is my 5 minutes. This is a hearing to vet the candidate. It is not a hearing for you to make a speech, but that's what they do, and our rules allow it, and it's just a waste of everybody's time." And ridiculous. So these people are trying to go against your directive that we want Donald Trump. We want to go to Washington and start to reduce this fat, this bloated giant, 2 million strong federal employees, only about 11% that even come to work on a semi-regular basis. Most just stay in their pajama pants and stay at home all day and collect a check that you and I provide for them. And we're not talking about small checks. These aren't like welfare handouts. These are full salaried directors and people that are supposed to be in office buildings in Washington doing the business of the people. We've got like 80% more federal employees than we need, because this is the great vision of this movement, this leftist movement, this elitist movement. These people that are better than you and better than me, they're smarter than us, they've gone to Ivy League schools, they know best, and we need a massive, gargantuan federal government to run this country and run your lives. And these people have got to be put in their place. It's got to stop. And as bad as the Democrat Party is, and people continue to vote for these folks. We had a chance to get rid of so many of them in the past election, and we did get a Republican majority in the Senate. But a Republican majority is not very good when you have Susan Collins from Maine, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska, and the guy who was the boss of the party for years in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, who's about 900 years old. He's half asleep half the time. He is making a statement and he just blanks out for a minute and stands there because he doesn't have a cogent thought. He's Joe Biden the second. Get him the hell out of Washington. Kentucky produces bourbon and horse racing and a horse's ass in Mitch McConnell, who voted against the certification of Pete Hegseth for the Secretary of Defense last week in the Senate. Mitch McConnell, who was in charge of rounding up votes for these very purposes, now is going John McCain when he has very little brain function left. He is, for some reason, on his own island now, opposing the agenda that he was supposedly in charge of for years. This guy needs to go. Kentucky, recall him, get him out of there. I think he's got 2 more years in his term. He did step down as the Senate majority leader. Thank God we've got John Thune, who's not much better, but at least he's got a functioning brain. Mitch McConnell needs to go. Your big majority isn't worth a damn if you've got senators like these that are ready to jump to the other side, depending on who's funneling them the most money and who they think they are catering to keep their stupid jobs. So this obstruction's got to end. I have to talk a little bit today about another subject that really hit home to me. If you've listened to the program, was raised in the Washington, D.C. area. We left there when I was 9 years old and moved to Atlanta. But I've got a lot of knowledge, a lot of relatives, people that still live there. And for many, many years, it's everybody in Washington knows full well just what a disaster waiting to happen that DCA Airport, also known as Ronald Reagan Airport, you knew that was coming. As soon as I heard the news on Tuesday of this collision between an Army Black Hawk helicopter and an incoming flight from Wichita, another one of my stomping grounds. When I left Birmingham in 1998, I became, as I mentioned before, in charge of all the operations in the state of Kansas for the Ruffin Company. And the Wichita flight on American Eagle was just added a couple of months ago, a direct flight to Washington, which was a big deal because just like Birmingham, you can't fly direct from Wichita to basically anywhere unless it's a big hub place like Chicago Midway or Dallas. For Southwest, it's Love Field. For everybody else, of course, it's DFW. But this was a big deal for Wichita, and this flight coming in on final approach at 325 feet, that means it's going to touch down in about 30 seconds. This is literally final approach. For there to be an in-air collision with an Army vehicle at that point just is an absolute abomination, because I can tell you when I flew there, I think it was 2018. It could have been as early as 2016, but I was called to sit in on a meeting with a lobbyist for the gaming industry. There was a lot of scrutiny right at that time about certain things that were happening in our business, and I was asked to come up and be an advisor for a meeting. Flew into Reagan with that incident. But when I was picked up, my associate, who was based in Northern Virginia, said to me, "Well, glad you got in. Good, we're good." And I said, "Well, we had to circle a couple times. I guess there's a lot of traffic." He goes, "There's always a lot of traffic, and it's worse now because about a week ago, we missed by an eyelash of a jumbo jet colliding with a helicopter right before they landed. In fact, it was so close, we're just talking at like 100 feet. Now, 100 feet is like 30 yards apart. I mean, for a jumbo jet and a helicopter to come that close. And in my further investigation over the years, I have come across about a half dozen at least of these near misses. And watching the coverage virtually all night Tuesday, in the middle of the night, they had some former Army colonel who was a Black Hawk pilot saying that he was involved in an incident in the last couple of years before he retired that was a close call. So this was not a unusual circumstance. This was inevitable. Folks, this was going to happen because the best example I can think of, if you're flying down the interstate and there's a way that somebody can like cut over in front of the traffic from one side of the interstate to the other, if there was some kind of road installed there and you're going 80 miles an hour and somebody tries to shoot across and you barely miss them, eventually there's going to be an accident. There is no way that the military, who makes their own rules, they're not following all the protocols of air traffic control in Washington. They make their own protocols, their own rules, and they do what the hell they want to do. And if they're flying their equipment, there's a refueling base right across the river from DCA. On the Maryland side, there are certainly corridors where air traffic comes in, and this is regular at an airport. Right here in Birmingham at my house, I'm right on a flight pattern, and every 10 or 11 minutes, jets on the exact same trajectory at the exact same altitude fly overhead approaching the airport. You've got just a couple of those corridors is what they're called, basically lanes that these planes approach on instruments on their final approach to the airport. This is established. This is where the commercial airlines operate. And for the military to just intersect with those lanes is absolutely ridiculous. But they do it because they can. They do it because they establish their own protocol. They do it because, well, our pilots are so experienced, we know what to do. The protocol there is to be about 200 feet because at the stage where this collision took place, the jetliner was supposedly at 325. That's way too close to start with. But if anybody adjusts a little bit, again, you're playing aerial chicken in these kind of situations. It's amazing this hasn't happened before, and it's absolutely heartbreaking for the 67 lives that have been lost here because it didn't have to happen. They don't need to be in the commercial lanes. They can fly east or west or north when these incoming, actually, they'd be flying south because these incoming flights are usually on that runway coming from a southerly direction and tracking to the northwest to the runway. So for the Army to just skirt across those lanes in the middle of one of the busiest airports in the country is absurd. But I heard some people, including that colonel, saying, well, I mean, this is how it's always been. We've always operated in this space, and we always take precautions, but they're not on the same system of air traffic control that commercial airliners are. And speaking of air traffic control, the established staffing amount for a night of this magnitude, a weeknight with the amount of traffic coming in, they were supposed to have ideally 30 air traffic controllers on duty in that tower to control all the traffic. Now, they're still tracking by radar. They know when there's a military vehicle in the area or some other plane. It's on their radar, and they are able on a different frequency to get in contact with the military aircraft if they see that there is going to be a little bit of a tight squeeze or space being violated. And there are broadcasts that night of saying, do you have visual on the incoming commuter jet? And there was no response from the helicopter. But they're not on the same system. They're not under the control of the traffic controllers because the military makes their own protocols. They've got their own control center. They don't pay attention, and they just operate independently because they're the military and they can, and nobody says anything. If it's an emergency situation, if there's some kind of incident at the Capitol that they've got to get there expediently, that's fine. This was a freaking training mission. This was to certify guys' ratings, and it was at 9 o'clock at night in the dark. You don't have to crisscross those paths. Maybe it's the fastest way back to your base if you're wrapping it up, but you can fly in a different direction and go around the pattern of where those aircrafts are going and not just by flying in a northerly direction beyond the airport, you can swing around then and head south on the other side of the airport. But crisscrossing these corridors is irresponsible, stupid, and just a waste of the lives of all of these poor innocent people. 30 seconds from landing and having their crafts collide. I had one friend send me by the way, there were only 19 controllers that night. 30 is the staffing level. There were 19. They had 20, but an hour before the wreck, somebody was not feeling well and was told they could go home, which cut it down to 19. That is a lot of seats empty. One guy was trying to coordinate the transportation and coordination and communication between the helicopter and the incoming jet, and obviously did not get the job done with tragic, just heartbreaking circumstances. These innocent lives on this plane whose lives were taken away because of the arrogance and just flat stupidity of this plan, and everybody just putting up with it in a situation that's been going on. Like I said, I was flying there 9 years ago, and it was an issue then. So I was not the least bit surprised. And it's just stunning that this can happen because it should never have happened. It's just arrogance. It's just stupidity. And I'm just so appalled that you're having people try to defend it of, well, this is how this has been our procedure forever. This is just life around DCA. It didn't have to be that way. And also a couple of days later, you had the medical plane crash in Philadelphia. People are saying we've had 2 plane crashes this week. That was a plane crash. That was a plane who had some kind of catastrophic failure. Something went horribly wrong with the human beings or the equipment or the plane itself, whatever it was. That is completely different than a military helicopter plowing into a commuter jet on final approach. It's a completely different circumstance. You can't just write those out as a plane crash. I heard some girl saying, well, I was going to fly next week somewhere, but I don't think I'm going to go now. as long as you're not going out of Reagan and Sean Duffy, who was the transportation secretary, he was actually approved. He's one of the few that's already gotten through Congress. He was on the job less than 1 day before the first accident involving a commercial airliner that resulted in the deaths of people in our country, the first one since 2009. Think of the thousands of flights that are conducted every day across this country, and you've got this person already scared to death to fly now because the media is making it sound like we've got some epidemic of problems. This was a Washington, D.C. problem. This was an Army problem. This was not an airline problem. 2009, that's 16 years without a commercial accident. And the last one was a commuter plane on a snowy night in Buffalo, where the pilots, it turned out, were far too inexperienced to even be at the controls of that flight, plowed into a house on final approach to the airport because of bad visibility. It's fluky. It doesn't happen very often. Actually, getting on an airplane is probably, well, it's not probably, statistically, it's a hell of a lot safer than driving your car to the local grocery store, I can assure you. So a lot of things to filter there, but don't let anybody tell you that this was some fluke accident. This was inevitable. Real quick, Tony has asked me to comment quickly on the whole subject of tariffs that Trump has gone into office as kind of the big stick he has. Do you all realize what a gigantic, massive, humongous trade imbalance we have in this country of how many goods we buy from everybody in the world and how few that we're allowed to ship ourselves? The trade imbalance is upside down. It's like having a group of friends and you've got a lot more money and a lot more wealth, and you go for a weekly lunch with your friends, and everybody's always looking to you to pick up the tab. And it's just an imbalance. It's not the fact that America should not be in a position to be magnanimous and give countries the opportunity to export their goods and import them into this country. But when the imbalance is so profound and these countries are taking advantage of us, Canada is a great example. It's like a 200% difference of what we import what we import from them as to opposed to what they send to us. It comes down to a point where they've got all these restrictions on American companies doing business in Canada, really prohibiting any kind of encouragement to bring in goods and services and different things. Banking by American institutions not allowed in Canada. All these things are slanted so far in the favor of the other countries, and America just continues to be the big stupid oaf that just kowtows and supports the entire world. Well, right now we've got a $36 trillion deficit. Our government just prints money that we don't have. We've got 2 million federal employees. We're the dance band on the Titanic right now, approaching the icebergs. Somebody's got to get this house in order and fix these imbalances and stop these deficits and make government responsible, not just the caretaker of the whole world, but watch out for Americans. That's what America First is. And tariffs are the big stick to balance that playing field. A couple of weeks ago, we had a flight on its way to Colombia taking back criminal aliens that we had rounded up. Colombia said, nope, can't land here. We're not taking them back. You just go ahead and take them back to America. We're not accepting them. Donald Trump on the golf course gets on his cell phone, makes a call, and lets the Colombian president know, you take them or we're going to have a 25% tariff on your imported goods first thing on Monday, which includes coffee. Most of the flowers that are coming up for Valentine's Day come from Colombia. They're huge, huge exports, and that country's economy is almost totally dependent. If they get a 25% tariff tacked on when they do business with all these American companies, all these American grocers for coffee, for flowers, for FTD, or whoever you want to mention, whatever flower retailers there are, that 25%, the company's has got to pass that cost on to you, the consumer. But that's just a temporary situation. For pricing will fix itself in a free enterprise system. But for the government that has to be charged an extra 25% to export their goods, 25% of the cost of the value of what they're exporting, that cuts their profit margin down to next to nothing. And that is a big, big stick. You saw the Colombian president an hour later say, oh, no, okay, we're good. In fact, if you're on your way back, I'll send my plane to get them. We're back in business. The Mexican president blinked this morning and said, hold off on these tariffs. They were supposed to go into effect at midnight tonight. Trump gave them 30 more days to get their house in order and fix this border situation where 30 people a day in America are dying from fentanyl poisoning. Over 100,000 last year. They're killing Americans because the Mexicans are letting this go on the border. And Trump said, no more. We're not bringing in products from you guys without a big financial penalty until you fix this that's broken. This is one of the things we have because all these countries are so dependent on us for their economics that we can impose some sanctions on them that are going to hit them in the pocketbook. And believe me, hitting people in the pocketbook gets things done. So maybe your cup of coffee, if this would have gone into effect, would have cost 35 or 40 more cents. Suck it up, people, because your country needs everybody to understand that this is the biggest stick we have right now. And it might be a little bit uncomfortable. The leftists don't like it because they believe that we need to be a good global citizen and share our wealth and might with everybody around the world. Well, our wealth and might is dwindling by the day because we owe so much to our future generations that we're never going to be able to get out of this trap unless we put a stop to it right now. And this is one of the best devices we have. That's what you need to know. I'm Kip Keefer. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll see you next week.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.